Good morning, everybody. We're going to be talking about two different topics today. So if you are a first-term president, the first set of slides that I'm going to go through is called The Business of Being President, and we're going to cover there the basic management duties of a chapter president and talk about the things that the chapter president has to do to manage the chapter. The second presentation we're going to go through is called The Art of Being President, and that's sort of President 201 as opposed to President 101, which we're going to go through now. So the business of being president is called How to Succeed as the Newly Elected President of Your Chapter. And this is cool because I'm sharing my screen and the slide is not moving. I'm in trouble already.
Can someone help out?
Aha.
Done.
The mouse works. Okay, so here is a greeting, and I'm going to credit. Skipp said the host muted me, and now I'm back off, right? Thanks, Rick, and now you're on mute. I love it when a plan comes together. In any event, so this is a congratulations, especially for your first term as president. You have to ensure the well-being of the chapter, and your task is to improve the enjoyment of the barbershopping experience. Your job is to make something happen that will move the chapter forward. And if you don't do that, your chapter is likely to regress. So leadership is an upfront job, and take charge. And now we'll see what else happens here when we move on. So they made you chapter president, and then the question is, especially if you're a first-term president, what the heck do I do now? Change is difficult to accept for everybody, and boy, have we learned that in spades in 2020. So you were probably elected to maintain the status quo, and your personal challenge, at least as a first-term president, is to manage. Managing is supervising your responsibilities, which are the things that have to be done for your chapter. Efficiency and delegation of duties will free you up to lead and breathe. Breathing is good. So the point is, if you don't know how to perform a task, you probably know what has to be done. And you probably know in your chapter, by the time you become a chapter president, who is the best person to do that. It's good if you know what success looks like and then manage your chapter during the year of your presidency to that success. So we're going to talk about some differences between management and leadership, and we're going to focus on management in this set of slides. To do management, you have to have plans. The manager organizes, produces order, implements systems, conforms to goals, assigns people to do the tasks that have to be done, controls those people who are doing that in an efficient and kind and loving manner, but yes, control. You allocate resources, and you focus efforts. And so those are the tasks that have to be done for management. And in terms of defining the management of a chapter, you can look at what has to be done, and then also how to do it. So when we get into the leadership section, we'll add another circle to this ring, but for the management session, the issue is knowing how to do, knowing what to do and how to do it. You're responsible as the chapter president to manage all of the chapter responsibilities. The manager keeps the machine running. That's your basic task during the year. So you plan, organize, produce order, same things we've gone through in the other slides. You assign people to do tasks because you know who can do that. You control those people, you allocate resources, and you focus efforts. Here's a president's action checklist. And by the way, Rick, for any of you who are interested in seeing them, Rick is going to send all of both of these presentations out to anybody who would like to see them. And my contact information is somewhere buried in these slides. And so if any of you have any questions about anything that I am saying today, you can feel free to contact me. Both my phone number and email are going to be on there. So we're going to talk about things that you need to do as a president immediately as you take off, things that happen down the road a little bit, and then long term. So immediately, you should be aware of the issues that are facing the chapter. Like, for example, the guy who was going to be president is leaving the chapter in 2 weeks. And the needs, those things that need your board's attention. Does the chapter have a direction, and do the members buy into it? A lot of the times, somebody will come in as a chapter president and make the unilateral decision that the chapter is going in a specific direction. And then sometimes 3 or 4 months down the road, they find themselves looking over their shoulder only to see that nobody is following them because the members don't buy into the direction that the new president would like to go. The chapter should have a mission statement and an annual work plan so that you probably have a template. And if you are a first-time president in particular, the person that you are replacing probably has, and the chapter, if you've been in it for a while, and boy, I hope any of you guys and gals who are now coming into the office of president are not coming in after only 6 months or 9 months as a barber shopper to the chapter, so that you've been around a little bit and you see the cycles that your chapter has gone through. Invariably, based on a chapter's culture, it will fall into a cycle where certain events occur at certain times during the year. And the chapters, the people who join the chapter are aware of that cycle. It's one of the reasons why they join. And so you'll want to maintain that and then work through the board and the chapter members if you decide that the chapter needs to go in a different direction. So that's immediately what needs to happen. It's kind of an assessment as you take office. On an as-needed basis, you need to make appointments. And I love this phrase, select active and functioning chairs for all the jobs critical to success for the year: the nominating committee, the show committee, singing Valentine's, and marketing. And the emphasis is on active and functioning chairs, although what we see a lot of times is that you're looking for a warm body so that you can have somebody to do those jobs. But that puts you into a sort of a sheepdog type role where you're constantly looking at whether the people who you've appointed are actually active and functioning in the job. So if you don't have a lot of people who are active and that you think will function, sometimes it's better, you will see, to leave a position vacant because there are some people who, when appointed, will take a job, not do it, and cause more damage than leaving the position open. And that's a decision that you and your board will need to go through. In addition to those things that we've talked about for immediately and as needed on a regular basis, there should be a chapter calendar. And it's a good thing to let your members know, and we'll talk about communication a little later, but be sure that your members are all aware of not only chapter events during the year, but district and society activities as well. We find that probably 85% of our chapters don't associate with the district and don't associate with the society at the society level at all. And I believe that when chapters are connected at both levels, the barbershop experience is far more satisfactory and enriching. On a monthly basis, You should conduct a board meeting and at a consistent time and place. Friendly reminders. Here's an issue: agenda distributed early. How many of us have been on a board and regularly, chapter board meets regularly, but when you walk in, somebody passes out the agenda for the evening. And it's then that you find out what the board is going to be discussing that night. That's probably not sustainable over the long term. And so if you can get an agenda distributed early, the other critical point here is to have functional vice president reports submitted early for reading. Many of us now operate with what we call a consent calendar, so that at the board meeting, there's a motion to receive the consent calendar of reports. Well, if your functional vice presidents don't submit or don't produce anything in writing early, there's not much to shorten. And then what you wind up doing, and you'll find, is that the vice presidents wind up giving an oral report, which turns the meeting into a 3 or 4 hour session, as opposed to the hour and a half or so that it could, and most effective chapters do hold their board meetings. Financial reporting is crucial. Needs to include income and expense reports, cash on hand, expenses. And here I say all accounting records should be neat and legible. And part of the reason for that is that even if you have a successful treasurer, there is supposed to be a review of finances done annually, not an audit or an official audit, but there should be a committee that reviews transactions just to make sure that everything is posted, that has been posted to the account, is accurate. And if you don't wind up having that audit review committee appointed, that's a danger sign. I'm aware of chapters and even a district or two in the society who did not have the review done for a number of years, only to find after the fact that a treasurer had actually been using the chapter or district credit card or writing checks to himself and making house payments and using personal expenses. And so if you allow an opportunity for that to happen, 99% of the time it's not going to, but there are occasions where it does. So be aware of that. And yes, even still more management techniques. On a weekly basis, you should try and ensure that there is a program for your chapter meetings with a working music leadership team. The idea is to provide musical growth, but also make sure that your chapter meetings are fun and invigorating. And I appreciate the fact that that is extremely difficult, has been in 2020, since most of us are either not meeting or meeting by Zoom or some other platform. It's a real challenge, and I appreciate that. But those are the kinds of things that make members keep coming back. And we are all hopeful that within the next 6 months, things will begin to open up so that we can get back to actually singing in person. On a weekly basis, you need to look at making sure that your team, your music team in particular, because that's why we're here, has functioning section leaders, have an assistant director if the chapter is fortunate enough to have somebody who is talented enough to do that. On an ongoing basis, there are PR and marketing strategies to identify with the communities you serve. We all live and have chapters that are active in different communities in terms of size, in terms of demographics, and in terms of the art community where you are operating. And so it's good to make sure that your functional vice presidents, especially marketing and PR, are working to connect with the communities that, and I say here that you serve, but they're the communities that you interact with. It's good on an ongoing basis to have a member satisfaction celebration. So you should strive to promote something or somebody every week. And that gives you a reason as the chapter president to talk to every member on a regular basis, not a weekly basis, but be sure that you know and are communicating with and touching the members, so that they know not only who you are, but know that you care about them. It is good to be sure that your chapter is connected at both the district and society, because, as I said, people who aren't aware and who only participate at the local level are missing. In my personal experience, probably 60% of the barbershop experience has been at the district and society level. And I've established friendships and relationships with people over my 49 years in the society, that had it not been for being active and having chapters active at the district and society level, I would never have met those wonderful people. So you have to coordinate with your other officers. And then you have a question that says, a secretary does all that stuff. And so you, as the chapter president, need to be aware of the activities that both the treasurer are assigned to do and the secretary is assigned to do. So the secretary has a pretty important function. The secretary is charged with corporate status reports, so that all of us are 501c3 corporations in our states, operating under, most of us, the BHS 501c3 license and status. But you are also a corporation in the state in which you operate, and the different state corporation commissions have different reporting requirements, but there is typically an annual reporting requirement for every corporation. We've worked with some chapters who have discovered, I had a discussion, I guess it was last year after the president's class, about a chapter that discovered that its 501c3 status and its incorporation status had been revoked 10 years before for failure to file the report and failure to pay the annual fee. And most states, it's a nominal fee, $10-15 or something like that. But the report has to go in, or the chapter risks losing its not only nonprofit status, but its corporation status. Secretary also maintains with the membership, the youth protection policies. Many of our chapters are engaged in youth activities, and the youth protection policies are crucial. And complying with those youth protection policies, they're all available on the BHS website. But those maintenance of those protection policies can wind up, if you fail to comply, risking insurance coverage and risking an incredible amount of liability for the chapter if something happens in violation of one of those policies. Chapter secretary deals with elections and reports the newly elected officers and other important contacts. And I've said here via the member center, many of us, I got an email this morning that said that effective Monday, the new member center is being rolled out. There was a platform that was called eBiz, and some of you may be familiar with that. All of that functionality is being incorporated into the member center. And so it should have different functionality for different people, and should be, the hope is it will be a more user-friendly platform for us beginning next week. The secretary should be the person who prepares the agenda and definitely the minutes. So as a president, when you're getting ready to do a board meeting, you should be in contact with your functional officers and ask them if they have issues that they would like to discuss at the upcoming board meeting. any new business. And so those activities should be included in the agenda in advance of the board meeting that you schedule. The secretary also deals with ASCAP and BMI licenses and make sure that those licenses are both filed and the expenses paid. Secretary should deal with copyright laws for music and learning tracks. And if there's any required program notices for copyright issues, for example, for a show program, that's the job of the secretary. If the chapter orders supplies, such as music from the society, it would be the secretary who does that. And the secretary should also be maintaining the annual calendar for the chapter. And then a safety checklist is a good thing to have, which talks about things like riser discipline and how to maintain and be sure that your members are safe at each meeting. And by the way, I have my screen to the point where I can see all of us. So if any of you have a question about anything that I'm saying right now, feel free to just hold up your hand and either Rick or I will try and notice that. So
I was just going to announce that when you got to the end of this slide. I think Chris Foisey has joined us. Chris, are you there?
I am. Good morning, guys.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, everybody. How are you? It's good to. Sorry, I put you all up on this screen so I could see all your faces. It's really good to see you all this morning. And I just wanted to hop in real quick and say good morning to everybody and thank you all for coming to LeadAc this year. This year marks the full year of JAD having to be. This event marks the full year of Johnny Appleseed District having virtual events. We haven't been face-to-face in a full year now. And it's rough, right? Really, really painful. And we can't wait to be back together with you all and singing together again. I certainly miss it, and I know you all do too. But meanwhile, we are all working hard. The district board is working hard to plan events that you can still participate in and still join and still have a good time and keep your barbershop flowing. We're working on a spring convention concept where we have quartets come to a central location and they can record their qualification video to submit to qualify for Cleveland this summer. I'm sure you all know International Convention is in Cleveland this year, and they are still working to make that as normal as it can be. And the host committee is still moving forward. We are definitely still looking for volunteers. So if any of you are interested in helping with the International Convention, we'd love to have your help and your assistance. I guess that's about it. If anyone has any questions for me, go ahead right now. Hey, Ted.
Not so much a question, but I think this would be a great opportunity for me. I have taken on a new role with the events team, and I will be responsible for moving forward with non-contest oriented events. I'm working on a spreadsheet right now of a lot of ideas, and in that spreadsheet, I'm going to try and illuminate things that could be done virtually as well as things that could be done actually moving forward. And I need to, or one of the slots that I'm going to be putting that into that is a list of people, particularly within our district, but also outside of our district, that would be wonderful leaders for those types of events. So if anyone has any ideas that they would like for JAD to program into our conventions that are not contest related, please reach out to me and let me know, and I'll make sure they get on that list. Or if anyone has any leaders that they are aware of anywhere throughout the society that are great at whatever, also let me know that too. So I thought this would be the appropriate time to mention that.
Yeah, hey, Ted, that reading session has really gained in popularity over the years. Yeah, that's definitely one that's on your list, I'm sure.
Yeah, we will definitely continue that.
Cool. And then
Hey,
Tim,
Chris.
I saw you. I'm sorry, Tim, I saw you put your hand up.
Yes, I did. I have an ongoing concern about COVID protection. And it concerns me that when groups like quartets gather in a central location to record videos, that they're maybe not being conscious of all the restrictions, mainly distancing and, sometimes, barriers. I mean, I know it's difficult as a group to sing when you're having to be spread apart, but I think it's really important that the groups gathering to sing do not risk exposure to COVID, and particularly right now when it's so prevalent in our state. So I'm in Ohio. So I'd just like to register that concern.
Tim, very much. Thank you for bringing that up. And you've voiced your concerns in the past, and we're doing everything we can to maintain a safe environment and do it. Quartets, if they're getting together and singing, they are already in each other's bubble. And we are not encouraging them to do that more, but we want to give them an avenue and a way to be able to practice what they're working on and perform for our district. And if they are already together and in close proximity and singing together, well, then we feel we can provide a safe environment within those bounds and give them the opportunity to perform for everybody. And I'll just tell you about the Harmony Harvest fall program that we put on. Everybody wore masks when they weren't singing. So the quartet would be done singing, they would walk off camera, put their masks back on, and go back outside. And by all accounts, mask wearing is a huge factor in preventing spread.
It is. Absolutely.
So, we had 0 reports of folks being sick after they returned from Harmony Harvest. I think we had roughly 50 to 60 participants, folks that were in the building together, and in the lobby together and talking. And they were all there at different times. They weren't on top of each other. People filed in and filed out. Some folks stayed the night, some folks didn't. But all in all, it was a successful, safe event. And we got to put some newish barbershop out to folks that we think really needed it. So, we've been successful so far. We're taking precautions. We're being as safe as we can be. And certainly participation is up to each individual guy. So
I understand that. I also am concerned that people talk about being in each other's bubbles. A bubble would have to be somebody that never makes contact with anybody else, like residents in a family in a single dwelling. 4 people who get together and sing, even though they do that a lot, they outside of that singing, they are not in the bubble, in my view. And so I think there's still a risk there. So I'll just register that. Okay.
Willard. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Just a quick question. You mentioned that you would be looking for volunteers for Cleveland. How should people tell you that they're interested?
So the JED website has a section just for international and also for the list of volunteer jobs that we are looking to do. I will go get that link and put it up in the chat when we're done talking here.
And by the way, I have been in touch with Nathan Miller, the Johnny Appleseed Events Vice President, talking about the quartet event in the spring. And one of the things that I promised him I'd do was to send Chris, you, and Willard emails saying, "Hey, the 3 of us need to talk," because we are. My understanding from talking with Nathan is that that spring event would include invitations to units from Cardinal District as well.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, Nathan's on. So we will, we'll definitely do that. Is there anything else that anyone else has a question about? All right, guys, have a great class and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Chris. All right, moving on. We talked about what the secretaries do, and here's what the treasurers do that presidents need to be aware of. Most important function is to keep the chapter off of suspension. Pay your chapter invoices, bills in a timely manner. Right now, chapters have been getting, or in, I guess, historically, chapters got a bill from the society for various and sundry functions that were spread across the entire society. The society has been moving toward what we call the chapter value proposition. And so that is going to entail having, rather than a pro rata share, of the society expenses that are charged to the chapters and districts, the chapters will be able to choose from a menu of activities, and so you will likely be billed for those activities in which you participate, and so it will be up to the chapter to determine whether the value proposition of those activities, so that if you feel like it adds value, you buy in and participate, and then your chapter will ultimately have the option to not participate in some programs. So that's been an ongoing process for the last couple of years. It will roll out on down the road, but that's the direction that Harmony Hall is going, just so everybody knows. The chapter president works with secretaries for renewals when posted by the society, and sees to the financial review. Now, the president, if you look at the president's chapter workbook, by January 31st is supposed to be sure that the treasurer, I'm sorry, for the financial review, the president appoints the review team by May 15th. And as I said, that's not a formal audit, but typically you pick 2 or 3 people to just simply get with the treasurer and review some transactions, pick months, pick a dozen transactions, pick anything that makes you feel comfortable that your treasurer is functioning the way the treasurer is supposed to function. Treasurer does prepare and file the IRS and state forms. 1099s are due by January 31st. And your 990 form to the IRS is due by May 15th. Treasurers also should work to prepare bank resolutions, signature cards, maintain social funds, insurance, and bonding. Most of the chapters that have bank accounts will have a signature card on file at the bank, and as an incoming president, you should probably get your name on as an approved signatory for checks. Typically, chapters will have at least 2 people, not necessarily having to be co-signers, but 2 people authorized to sign checks, so that if a treasurer is not available for some function or something comes in, somebody else is able to write checks on behalf of the chapter. The chapter treasurer should deal with the budgeting process, and typically that should be done with input from all of the functional vice presidents and committees. If you have committees that, for example, a show committee, if you do an annual show and the show involves a significant number of funds, then the committee chair is probably in a better position than perhaps even the music and performance VP at knowing the logistics of the show and the kinds of expenses that should be coming up. So those people should be involved in providing input to the treasurer for the budgeting process on an annual basis. I've been in chapters in which the budget is sort of a rinse and repeat, so that you say, well, this is what we've spent for the last 5 years, and we're going to budget the same amount for the next years. If that's the situation in your chapter, I would suggest that you do a review of that, because if that's the case, it probably is indicative that the chapter isn't changing its operations very much. And so if you're looking to grow, if you're looking to do something different, but your budget doesn't align with the new activities that you're going to undertake, that's a problem. And it becomes more of a problem toward the end of the year when things start happening and invoices come in, or even additional revenues come in that weren't considered when you adopted the budget in the first place. Chapter treasurer should also coordinate with secretaries for protection of copyrights, including ASCAP and BMI, chapter music and music derivatives like learning CDs and websites. The treasurer also is responsible for paying the bills for incorporation and liability insurance. So we've talked about what the secretary and treasurer do. What's the president do? You should be, as president and as a manager, an active board member. And if there's a tie in a vote, then and only then does the president vote on the board. You should be the head of the chapter leadership team, which means that you have a responsibility to know what your functional vice presidents and committees are doing, and not to do that, but to know what they are doing. It's not your job to do all those functions. And I know a lot of presidents get burned out because they wind up by default having to perform a lot of those activities. You're responsible for planning and chairing all of the board and chapter meetings. Now, there's a difference also between a board meeting and a chapter meeting. The chapter has meetings for the purpose of, for example, elections. Those are done at a meeting of the entire chapter. And then, as we talked about, boards meet typically on a monthly basis. You know, in 2020, it may not have been necessary for your board to meet every month. So that could be on an as-needed basis. But as we get back to in-person events, then the board may have a need to meet more frequently. I'll also take this opportunity to mention the fact that under the new chapter bylaws, there is an option for a chapter to have an executive committee, which allows a subset of the board, typically your president, treasurer, maybe your EVP, and maybe your secretary, to conduct chapter business if something comes up between board meetings. So the decision has to be made, maybe whether to sign a contract for some activity, and you're unable to get the board together. It used to be more important and more critical before platforms like Zoom. Now you can convene a meeting pretty easily, but the bylaws allow a chapter to have an executive committee to take action between board meetings. Caution that the executive committee is not supposed to run the chapter as a subset and then simply report to the board at your board meeting, this is what we've done, take it or leave it. The executive committee is supposed to function only in unusual circumstances. You should be directing the establishment of the chapter's mission statements, goals, and objectives. Now, when I say the establishment of a mission statement, if the chapter doesn't have a mission or a vision, it would be good for that to be done. And if your chapter doesn't have a mission or vision statement, you would do yourself a huge favor to work with the board and the chapter to go through that process to develop a mission and vision statement. You don't have to change your mission and vision every year, but we'll talk a little bit later about the fact that the chapter's culture will change every year. It is I don't know of any chapter because of our tendency of chapters to lose and replace at least 10% of your members every year. So that's kind of a 20% swing annually in the personality of your chapter. So it may turn out that as the chapter culture evolves over time, you should look at your mission and vision statement and think about revising them if the current mission and vision statement don't match the direction that the personality of the chapter or the culture of the chapter wants to go. You need to be knowledgeable of the duties and progress of all board members. That can involve some difficult conversations at times when somebody's not functioning, but that's your job as president to manage those. You appoint committee chairs and committees. You're a non-voting member of all committees. And in the parenthetical here, the nominating committee each year that the chapter president appoints should seek but not be bound by the current chapter president's input. The reason I make that statement is it may turn out that the chapter nominating committee is looking to go in a direction that you're not as the chapter president, and it may be better for both parties for you to part ways after one term. It is clearly in the chapter's best interest for someone not to serve as chapter president more than a couple of years at a time. Not to say that you shouldn't be able to or want to come back, but it's always good to rotate somebody fresh in after probably the second year. If you are in your fourth year as chapter president, that's probably a red flag for your chapter to say that things are not going the way they ought to be going, and the chapter's probably not moving forward the way it could to be an effective chapter. As the president, you should also follow up with each board member to be sure progress and deadlines are met. It is not healthy for a chapter if at a board meeting after board meeting, a functional VP's report is either the same or says, I didn't have time this month to do what I said I would do. And if that happens more than a couple of times, you may find yourself having to have one of those difficult conversations with the folks who are not functioning. You need to evaluate, and it's your job to evaluate the performance of the leadership team and deal with weaknesses. We all have them, strengths and weaknesses. And so in the sheepdog mode a little bit, it is good to get back in the loop and make sure that those kinds of performance weaknesses are corrected. And you don't have to do that by, if it's an appointed position, by going in and sort of saying, okay, you're fired. It is good to then try and gently and lovingly try and correct weak performances. You assess progress of the chapter's annual plan and budget. Serve as or assign delegates to the district House of Delegates meetings. And if your chapter doesn't participate in House of Delegates, shame on you. The House of Delegates is the body that governs what actually happens in the district. House of Delegates has an incredible amount of authority and power over the district board. And so the district board has the authority to run the day-to-day business of the district, but it's the House of Delegates that winds up having to review potential actions and affirm what the board is doing. And the House of Delegates has the ability to change the course of the district. And it's your way of expressing your chapter's opinion on district activities. So please make sure that either you serve, and the bylaws say that the chapter president is the delegate unless you delegate that task to somebody else. So as the chapter president, and being the person who knows more about what's happening in your chapter than anybody else, it's better for the health of the district if you as the president are able to participate in the House of Delegates meetings. And then attend training and education related by administration offered by both the district, and thank you all for being here today, and then the society. The society is putting together even now a number of internet-based training courses. We did what turned out to be an incredibly successful virtual Harmony University last year. We are hopeful that we can do an in-person version of Harmony University in 2021. But if that's not possible, we'll go back to the virtual level as well. But based on the success of last year's virtual Harmony University, even if there is an in-person ability to do Harmony University, we will more than likely have in parallel virtual Harmony University classes, and perhaps there'll be a way for people to virtually participate in the in-person classes. The Harmony Hall staff is working on those now. Okay, let's talk about the essential characteristics of effective chapters. And I'm not saying successful chapters, although if your chapter is effective, it probably is successful. You have a mission statement. It's clear, concise, and compelling. All of the members understand it internally, and significantly, your external community understands your mission statement as well. And I say here, relentlessly pursue it, and it's got to be realistic and achievable. An effective chapter has strong leadership at both the board and music levels. Leaders carefully selected. I get the fact that if you have a chapter of 15 people, carefully selecting leadership is not an easy task, but pick the best folks that you have from the people you have to select from. You need to give feedback to the people who are in your functional vice presidents and committees. It's good if you can get a good mix of both old and new talent, and then push core values. I can't emphasize too much the strength of both the board and music levels. Many of us are in awe of chapters like the Ambassadors of Harmony and Vocal Majority. Vocal Majority has been incredibly successful for 50 years, but they will be the first to tell you that without the administrative depth that they've had over those 50 years, the musical ability wouldn't be there. Jim Clancy and Greg Clancy couldn't do with the chorus time and time again what they do without having an active music team and a very, very deep administrative program. I mean, that chapter goes through $200,000 or $300,000 of budget a year. And so you have to have strong administrative capacity in order to make that happen. Ambassadors of Harmony, the last I heard, their annual budget is $180,000 to $200,000 as well. So we're not talking about our chapters doing those kinds of things, but it's the kind of thing that can be possible if you have a strong administration and a strong music team. Strategic thinking. I don't know about you all, but when I took driver's education, one of the things that I found was that as I first started to drive a car, my focus behind the wheel was about 2 car lengths in front of me. And when you start driving that way, the car's path down the road gets pretty erratic. You weave back and forth. And over time, we all eventually learn to focus our attention down the road. And so I think it's a good analogy for strategic thinking in a chapter. If your focus is on your annual show in 3 or 4 months, or singing Valentine's, and that's all you're doing, and that's all you're thinking about are the things that are on your calendar and have been for the last 25 years, you're probably not going to be as effective as you could be, or maybe even as successful as you could be, if you begin saying and looking at your vision and mission and doing a plan to say, well, here's where we'd like to be in 5 or 10 years. We'll talk about strategic planning in a bit, but strategic thinking is where you begin that. Okay. You have programs, high quality programs embodying the mission, and you have to have easily measured and well communicated goals to those programs. My second year or so on the society board, we used to have goals and objectives that we called aims. And the board would change the aims and then turn those to the CEO and say, okay, here's your aims for this year. But we never were able to get data. And I will never forget when we brought in a consultant to talk us through strategic thinking and strategic planning. One of the board members in, I think it was 07 or 08, as the guy was talking about his the elements of a strategic plan and these aims that we had, one of our board members asked him, well, should we be thinking about, shouldn't we be changing our aims for next year? And his question back to the board member was, well, how are you doing on the aims that you've got for this year? And the answer was, well, we don't know because we don't have data that we can measure. And the guy, the consultant, looked at him and said, then what in the hell are you doing thinking about changing them? If you don't know where you are, you can't possibly predict where you're going to go. And so your programs have to be able to be measured, the success, and you have to communicate that those measurements to the chapter members. Communication, relentless emphasis on communication. Focus on image, both internally and externally, because we all have an internal and an external image. The chapter meeting every week has an image to everybody who participates. Externally, how you relate with your community could be a totally different image, but you got to focus on both of those in your communications. Effectively used technology through your operations. Some of us are better at that than others. I will confess that the year I was installed as society president, my first name tag, normally they give you a name tag, just like you do at the chapter, that says Skipp Kropp, society president. My first name tag that I was handed said Yang, the technical Neanderthal, society president, which was pretty much true. And I'm not a whole heck of a lot better now, but those are the kinds of things that these platforms like Zoom and Teams and others, if you can get people in the chapter who are technically good to work through those for you, you'll have a much more effective chapter and chapter meeting, particularly now. Basics. You need to have up-to-date bylaws, contracts, and agreements. There are standard chapter bylaws that the chapter board should adopt at its first board meeting in the year. Typically, those bylaws are available on the society website, and they are updated by the Governance and Bylaws Committee of the society to incorporate newest revisions to things like IRS codes and corporate status in some. We are moving away from the command and control unit where we used to say you have to have a president and you have to elect 17 officers, and now we're streamlining that to allow chapters options on how they want to operate their business each year. There's also an opportunity to elect in the bylaws your composition, whether you want to remain all male, whether you want to go mixed, or whether, I mean, it's even possible you could become all female. And so if the direction of your chapter changes over the year, that should be included in the new bylaws that you adopt to change those at the beginning of every year. You need to do financial planning and reporting and effective revenue generation. A lot of small chapters don't have a huge budget, but that makes planning for the revenues and expenses that you do have pretty critical to be sure that you're on top of that so that the chapter can continue to be successful. Okay, and so now we say lead on. So the question is, well, okay, who am I leading? You have to know your leadership team and you have to know your membership. Surveys and assessments gather data. One of the things that you will find is that if you make assumptions about the will of your chapter, it's something that I said earlier, you may turn around in 6 months to find out that nobody is following. And so I recommend that you do some kind of an annual survey of the membership because, as I said, more than likely, you will have at least a 10% turnover in membership. So you're going to lose 10% of your folks. You're going to gain, you hope, at least 10% so that your membership isn't declining. And the culture of your chapter will change over time. And so I recommend at least an annual survey, a sort of a, how are we doing? And you get that opinion from your members. And then you also ask, are there things that we aren't doing that you would like to do? And move forward from that. And that's how you make your plan for the next year. Do a SWOT analysis for the leadership team. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It is good to have some kind of a retreat of your leadership team and talk about and literally put on some kind of a whiteboard or a sheet in each area. Identify the strengths of your chapter, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats, so that that is the basis for your annual plan. Surveys for the membership help create a chapter's mission. So if you don't have a mission yet, that's a good way to determine the direction that your chapter wants to go. It's not healthy for the board to unilaterally develop a mission without input from the chapter, because if you do that, you may find out that you lose a bunch of members who don't support that mission. Okay, so we talked about who are you leading. Now, what are you leading? An annual plan or signature project. Many of us who are members of churches find that, for example, if you pay off the mortgage on your building, all of a sudden participation starts to drop because there isn't a signature project that the members coalesce and pull the same direction to make happen. So if your chapter has a signature project, like, for example, singing Valentine's, or like its annual show, that's the what that you're looking to lead. Consider a 2-year plan with an EVP for succession planning and looking at the direction of the chapter. So, okay, now you know the who and the what. How do you lead? A strategic plan is the way that you can lead. So you move forward under a strategic plan, or likely the chapter is going to be going backwards or not moving at all. Okay. Oh my God, not strategic planning. Well, yeah, so here you go. And here's my point. Get over it. It's not that hard. And to be successful, as you determine what success looks like, you can't do that without some kind of a strategic plan. That starts with the mission statement, which says who we are and who we want to be. Mission statement of my chapter in Indianapolis is we enrich lives in the community by performing with excellence. That's who we are and who we want to be. A vision statement. Where are we going to be in 3, 5, or 10 years? In 2017, the society rolled out a new vision statement, and it's simple. It's everyone in harmony. That's what we want to have happening in 3, 5, and 10 years, and it applies to everybody. Short range and long range goals have to be established as part of a strategic plan. And then a business plan, which is, okay, I've got my mission, I've got my vision. I've established my goals. Now you do a business plan that says, how do I get from here to where I want to be? A strategic plan clearly defines the purpose of the organization and establishes realistic goals and objectives that, of course, have to be consistent with the mission. And they also have to be consistent with the resources that your chapter has. For example, if you are a 15-member chapter right now, it's probably not realistic for your mission and vision to say, or your strategic plan to say that you're going to win international chorus contest in 3 years. You have to be realistic about your strategic plan, and the strategic plan has to fit the resources that your chapter has. Now, you could have a long-range goal to win international in 10, 15 years, but then you have to back calculate, okay, now that that's my goal and my chapter members all buy into that, how are we going to get there? The strategic plan communicates the goals, objectives to the organization's constituents, so you get everybody to own them. You develop a sense of ownership of the plan of all of the members. It ensures the most effective use is made of the organization's resources, by focusing those resources on the key priorities. It gives you a base to measure progress and establishes a mechanism for informed change. Now, change for change's sake is not a hallmark of an effective or successful chapter. You need to know why you want to change the plan. The plan should be reviewed periodically. The society, for example, has a strategic planning committee that is now reviewing and has been reviewing since we adopted the strategic plan in 2017. That plan to see what changes need to be made, or if changes need to be made in the current strategic plan. The plan listens to everyone's opinions in order to build consensus. You got to have consensus on the direction of your chapter, or you could find yourself, again, looking over your shoulder in 6 months and finding nobody's following. 10 steps to a strategic plan. One is be the best that you can be at whatever you are trying to be. State your purpose in the plan. It needs to visualize the future. I'm a member of the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, and we have a strategic plan called Vision 2050. And in that strategic plan, the Indiana Chamber of Commerce has outlined the direction that at least the Chamber of Commerce community thinks the state of Indiana should be heading between now and the year 2050. We just ended a plan called Vision 2020 that was adopted in the year 2000. So that's the kind of detail, visualizing the future. What do I want to be when I grow up? Take an inventory of where you are. Profile your customers. Who are the communities that you serve? Not just your members, but who is active in your locality that you want to interact with. Write down the goals. Assess the resources. Then take action to accomplish those steps in the strategic plan. Keep score. You got to be able to measure where you are so that you know where you are along the timeline of the strategic plan, or you don't know how to change and you don't know the direction that you are headed. And finally, make strategy a habit. Review the strategic plan periodically and update it as necessary. Okay. Where can I get help? BHS website Document Center has a document called the Chapters President Workbook. How many of us have seen that document? Hands? Okay, not everybody. Do yourself a favor and download that Monday as soon as you can. Inside the Chapter President's Workbook, you will find an annual schedule of responsibility of members of the leadership team. It's a template. It will discuss issues that could cause suspension or revocation of a chapter charter, and those include late bill payments, late filing of IRS or CRE required forms, late filing of annual financial review, and late filing particularly of incorporation status. Those can wind up with causing suspension or revocation of your chapter charter. The chapter president's workbook talks about running board meetings, preparing an effective agenda. It defines, helps you define a quorum. It's greater than 50% of the board members, greater than 30% of the chapter members. If it's a chapter meeting, a meeting of all chapter members, as opposed to a board meeting. And then talks about the use of Robert's rules. If your chapter board is 10 or 11, there's no hard cutoff. You can use Robert's rules for small boards, and that can streamline your board meetings dramatically. Under Robert's rules for small boards, you don't need a second for motions. And all you ask for when a motion is made is, are there objections? If there are no objections, then you as president say the motion is passed and you move forward. Many of us, and myself included, have been in chapters in which if you can't use the small board rules, somebody has to be talked into seconding a motion, and then you wind up discussing it for an hour, and that can dramatically slow down a chapter meeting. So if you are able to use small board rules, I highly recommend those. Board meetings should include the minutes and include written reports. The workbook talks about engaging volunteers, the annual business plan, how you define success, what type of chapter are you, what identity you want, and setting goals. One of the things that we have, I will say, revised dramatically is the ability of chapters to define success the way they want to define success. We used to be command and control. We used to be a one-size-fits-all chapter model. No longer the case. And so there are lots of options available, but I can't emphasize too much the fact that you need to do that by knowing your membership and knowing the direction that the members want to go. So there's other places to get help. In the Member Center, Member Center has documents on insurance and finance. Probably doesn't apply to too many of the chapters in Cardinal and Johnny Appleseed, but crossing the US border for BHS activities, insurance questions, certificates of insurance and how to get those, insurance claims, proof of tax exempt status. That document is on the BHS website in the Member Center, so that if you are signing a contract, for example, with a venue for an annual show and you want the nonprofit discount, they'll say, well, prove it. Then you can use the tax exempt status from the society to do that. Member Center has the availability of going online for a director search. And then there's other information on membership programs and assistance. Other places include chapter bylaws. We've already talked about the fact that there are standard chapter bylaws. There are lots of options in those bylaws. So it's not necessarily a cookie cutter for every chapter. There are a lot of electives that each chapter is allowed. Chapter statement of policy. If your chapter doesn't have a statement of policy, you may find creating one helpful. The statement of policy, I describe it as nesting inside the chapter bylaws, and it covers policies that the bylaws don't cover. For example, the bylaws allow you to elect as many board members as you see fit to run the business of the chapter. A parallel in the chapter statement of policy would be, it is the policy of Greater Upchuck chapter to elect a vice president of fun or something else. So that is not inconsistent. It doesn't conflict with the bylaws, but it does provide a memorialization of the policies of your chapter. You may put things in there, for example, the annual show price of your tickets. Your ad prices could go in a statement of policy, doesn't have to, but it's not inconsistent with the chapter bylaws, and it does memorialize chapter policies. Uniform policy is another thing that could go in a chapter statement of policy.
Skip, can I interrupt for a second?
Yes, sir.
I asked at one time, there was a statement that these need to be approved at the society level, either annually or initially when you create them. And I don't know if that was the bylaws or the statement of policy. And so do you know the difference?
The bylaws, if you are requesting a change to the standard chapter bylaws, that has to go through. Now, the Governance and Bylaws Committee of the Society will review your statement of policy if you'd like.
Okay.
I don't believe that has to be done. It's not mandatory because the society doesn't care what your show ticket prices are and doesn't care what your uniform policy is. But if you would like a review so that the Governance and Bylaws Committee confirms that what your statement of policy is saying is not in conflict with either IRS or state corporation laws or the chapter bylaws, you can request that.
Okay. The only other thing I wanted to mention is we're about 10 minutes from 10:30. So
Yes, sir.
if you wanted to take a break at 10:30, target that.
I will probably take a break before 10:30 because this happens to be my last slide in this slide deck. So you can get help from district officers. You can also get help from other chapters and presidents. So if you know other chapters and presidents, and it's a good thing to go to a district House of Delegates meeting to meet other chapter presidents so that you can commiserate on the common issues among all chapters, because all chapters have common issues. Other art organizations in town, there are other nonprofit organizations like us. And some of them are more than happy to collaborate with your chapter and also more than happy to engage with your chapter on activities in your community. The other option that you have in your bylaws allow a chapter to have a community board member that may or may not be a member of the society or a member of your chapter. A lot of chapters that are active in arts communities find that to be very helpful to be integrated into the arts community in your town. So think about that option if you have a possibility to do that. And that is the end of this slide deck. I suggest that we take a 10-minute bio break, and then we'll talk about the art of being a president. Does that work for everybody?
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Are these slides going to be available anywhere?
Yes, sir. They will
Where?
be sent. Rick is going to send them to all of the attendees. And he actually has an earlier version that I may have changed some slides in. So he's going to send the ones that I'm doing today. And then my contact information is on those slides. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to call or email me.
So here is the issue. If you registered through Eventbrite, I have the list of those people who registered. If you didn't do that and just clicked in on the links today, you'll need to send me your email. I guess I can go back and see who's here and try to track down your email. It'd be easier if you sent me a request. And if you don't know my email, I can give it to you later, but I won't do that right now. Okay.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, Pat Scarpiti here from Land of Legend. It took me a half an hour to get in, so I missed the treasurer and secretary duties. If someone could make sure that I get those, appreciate that.
Like we say, if we will send you a copy of the entire slides. So
Yeah, I went through Eventbrite and could not click in Zoom.
I know we did have some problems this morning, and part of my disconnect this morning was trying to see what was going on. We think that everyone eventually got in, and we apologize for that. Again,
It's no problem. I realize there's always technical difficulties, but I just wanted to make sure. This is the end of my first year as being president, and I've been trying to nail down the secretary and treasurer duties and get those codified in a 3-ring binder. And it's been like herding cats. So if I could have those, that would really be helpful.
You can have Skipp slides, which will tell you generally, but there are resources on in the member center right now that gives it in a lot more detail, because Skipp just hit highlights. The other
Right.
secretary and treasurer sessions have got a lot more detail, and those documents give you a considerable amount of detail.
Thank you.
Bennett, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, Skipp and Rick. Just a quick one. I'm also a person who's just finishing his first year as president of a small chapter down here in Bloomington, Indiana. And thank you for letting us work into the Johnny Appleseed leadership training. The question is this: it's very easy to talk about the need for short and long range goals, but I'd love to hear about, maybe this could take place in the next section of your discussion. I'd like to hear a little bit about the kinds of goals that small chapters do set out for themselves. Clearly, doing well in competition is one goal, or producing a nice annual show is a nice goal. But I'd like to hear about some of the other chapters and what they perceive as their goals. So if that were possible, that would be kind of nice.
I'll tell you what, let's take now my computer says 10:24. Let's come back at 10:30 and we'll start the next session with that discussion.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Great. All right. Okay, guys and gals, the two things I wanted to mention was, and Steve Weismersky would not forgive me if I did not mention it, is the idea of using and the resources that Healthy Chapter Initiatives has, the think process. If you have not gone through that, what that does is it helps you look at who you are, it looks at what you do, and then it looks at the way you're spending your time and money. And it's a very organized, thoughtful process about going through a self-analysis and trying to align all of those things to make sure that you're doing what you should be doing with what you say is important to you. And so if you're interested in that and have not heard about that or have not gone through that process, my assumption is that's still available to chapters, and you might want to contact Steve for that. The other thing is, Skipp mentioned the idea of assessing taking the temperature of your membership from time to time, maybe even annually, to see how things are going. When I first became president, I created a survey and I gave it to them about that particular type of thing. We do have things under the Healthy Chapter Initiative for analyzing individual talent within your membership, and having your leaders assess your process and your program, but not taking the temperature of the members themselves. So if you want a copy of that, I was just trying to find it, and I've got all the results and everything, but I can't find the original at the moment, or I'd share that with you right now. Just send me an email and ask for it, and I'll try to send you a copy of that. You might need to enter it into Excel to get your means and all of that kind of stuff, but or find someone who can do that for you. But it's a good way, and I think I covered probably most of what you'd be interested in anyway in that survey. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Rick. And we talked to Bennett about the fact that we would spend a few minutes when we reconvened talking about the goals of some small chapters. Bennett, the one that you mentioned in particular was competition, but there are a lot of chapters that don't do competition. And I thought it might be helpful. Ted Rose mentioned, and I'm a member of Ted's chapter in Charleston, West Virginia. I directed there for several years and was a member for 26 years. But the Greater Kanawha Valley chapter in Charleston, West Virginia has taken a very different and creative tack, I think, in terms of who they are and what they want to be. So in terms of establishing goals, I think I'd like to ask Ted to start our discussion on goals for small chapters. It is a small chapter, and just Ted, talk a little bit about what you all have done.
Okay, nothing like being on the spot. Well, so I think part of it is there's been a journey, and to your point, that journey that we've been on over at least the last 22 years that I've been associated with the chapter, I think has been a good example of continually reevaluating and reestablishing new goals, new visions, new action plans. So back when I joined, we were doing a thing called Vision 2000. And that was a big document that we all signed. All of the members got together and discussed where we wanted to be, I think in 5 years. It started in 95 and ended in 2000, and I joined in 98. So pardon me if the dates are a little different. But so we assessed that we wanted to engage more with our community, and that we wanted to also improve our score. And we garnered buy-in by the members by having them literally sign a huge poster, and that talked about what actions they would do. So that's when we started getting coaching from a particular person. That's when we started beefing up sectional things. Those were sort of our goals at that time. There were more measurable statistics associated with that, but I wasn't leadership at the time. Fast forward, I don't know, Skipp to sort of the time period where I was out and you were in. I know that there was a vision around moving from the C level to the low B level. And so you guys had set a bunch of goals to change the way that you rehearsed and change the way that you held each member accountable for knowing the notes and the words. And there was a huge focus on shifting from 90% is good enough to no, 100% of the notes and the words is vital to us for us to be able to go in. That's what it means to move into the B level, is we don't worry about that anymore, right? And so all of the actions, all of the changes to the rehearsal technique and the expectations to members were set up around that fact. We met that goal. Fast forward a little bit, and everyone in Harmony was rolling out, and our chapter got together and said, we want to ride the front of this wave. We had a little kick in the butt because I was on a particular committee at the time, so I was aware it was coming a little sooner than most, and we were able to preset initiatives. But we made a decision that we wanted to sit down with our current members and some of our affiliated parties and establish, do we want this? And what do we want to do to affect that change? And part of the action plan that we set out was engaging more community members to find out whether or not they would be interested in pursuing an a cappella ensemble that was mixed gender. And the response from our community was overwhelming. Yes, they did want that. No, they did not want it to be exclusively barbershop, but yes, they wanted it to be some barbershop. And so we set Harmony Required's base standards based on those initial months of conversations. We set kind of what level of ability we expected from our members up front. This was an enviable place for us to be in because we could make decisions rather than have to change, if that makes sense. But we still set goals and set actions in place and polled our community to determine what the community wanted. So that was huge for us. I think we've had a pretty successful couple years. I've been grateful for the opportunity to do what we've done. The next year, we set a goal for the all-male version of the ensemble, or of the chapter, the Canal Chordsmen, to score their first 70. So we elected to have more coaching sessions per year and require a certain amount of attendance. And the result was a measurable outcome of that, which we did score our first 70. Since then, we've made more plans, but hopefully that was a brief sort of overview of the different types of goals and action plans.
It is, Ted. Thank you. And for those of you who may not be aware, the Greater Kanawha Valley chapter in Charleston, West Virginia, has a male chorus called the Kanawha Chordsmen. Harmony Required, which is the group that Ted mentioned, is a mixed ensemble that is, and both of those choruses are under the Greater Kanawha Valley Chapter Charter. So that chapter, as a goal, has decided that it wants to operate 2 different performing units. Other chapters could have a VLQ, for example, of all men. The chapter could remain all male, or you can be mixed. But those are different goals, aside from simply saying we want to compete and we want to sing better. So, Bennett, does that help you?
Yes, that helps enormously. Within the context, just one quick question. Within the context of engaging the community, of course, I guess there are different levels of interactions with senior living centers and churches and social groups and so forth, where we all reach out to help others. Are there other ways that small groups sometimes think of reaching out to the community rather than in addition to just simply providing free events or relatively inexpensive events for the community?
I'm aware of a couple of chapters, Bennett, that rather than providing musical entertainment for groups like that, chapters have goals of, for example, finding and paying for young people to go to harmony camps.
Ah, yes, brilliant. Good thinking. Yes.
So there are all kinds of those opportunities available. Rick, would you do some kind of a mass email to the group of people who are on here, and say, here's everybody's contact information so you can share those kinds of things? Because we do need to get moving on the rest of my slides.
Yes, what I just posted in the chat room was a reminder that if you did not register through Eventbrite, to send me your email, and my email is just a couple of notes above that. We will send out the 3 things that I mentioned there, Skipp's PowerPoints, the survey I mentioned, and the information concerning the evaluation of the session. And in doing so, I will post everybody's email in the upper 2 window so that everyone will be there and you can see their emails, and you can, what I like to do is I like to hit reply all and then change everything down below just to make sure that I get everybody in the email that's up above. And I'm sure you all know that trick as well, rather than cut and paste those into a new, which you can do, into a new email. So that's taken care of, and we'll do that.
Terrific. And thanks everybody for the discussion. We've talked about the business of being president, and so the first slide deck that we went through talked about the things that you need to do as president to make sure that your chapter still exists at the end of your first term or even second term, and maintains its status as a chapter. The next set of slides I'm going to go through are we call the art of being president. And it's framed a little differently to succeed as the newly elected president of your chapter. And okay, I've said go. And let's see. Here we go. So change is difficult. And we've talked about the fact that managing and supervising activities is critical. And we've gone through these kinds of stuff as managers. Now, as a leader, as opposed to a manager, one of the things that you need to do is to give ownership to your board of directors. You are not a dictator as the chapter president, and so you have to get input from them. You also have to understand your leadership team and understand your membership. Be mindful of the chapter's doors. Are they open, closed, or are they screen doors? When somebody comes into the chapter, do they understand what they might be getting into if they decide to join? This is part of the leadership opportunities and techniques. be mindful of the intended end right from the start. So for example, if your end is to recruit new members, you should have and make sure that there are resources available to somebody coming in the door so that they don't just show up for 3 weeks if you can get them back through the 3rd week. And then you say, okay, here's your membership form. That typically does not result in somebody saying, oh, okay. And a number of our chapters experience difficulties because somebody actually fills out the form, pays their first year dues, and then 3 months down the road says, wow, I got to pay a uniform fee? Holy moly, I got to go to a convention and pay registration out of my pocket? You didn't tell me that when I joined. So those are the kinds of things that you need to make sure are available to somebody coming in the door. You're not alone, but you can't lead everyone, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So earlier we talked about the fact that as a manager, you knew the what and the how. As a leadership, you add the next ring in the bullseye, which is the why. And it's the why that causes a lot of people to either leave the chapter or to return. If your chapter is not providing the kind of enthusiasm and the kind of activity that interests people, they won't come back. And typically what we find, and we used to do an exit survey, I don't even know whether the society does anymore, but we found that people tend to not be honest in those exits. They leave, and then you contact them and say, well, gee, you didn't renew your dues, why? And the answer is, I don't have time. Well, that's probably not the case. They don't want to say, our director's a jerk, or there's people in my baritone section who are obnoxious and they make fun of me every time that I come in the door. So those exit surveys are not good, but it's the why. And the why is communicated best through what? A mission statement and a vision that you can share with somebody coming in the door that says, this is why we do this every week. It's, in my case, it's to enrich lives in the community by performing with excellence. And if somebody comes in the door and you say, this is what we do, and if you're interested in doing that with us, we'd love to have you join us. That's how we get to where chapters become successful. So you're all in this together. Successful presidents don't run the board of directors from the top, and that's why it's so critical when you do your monthly board meetings to have your functional vice presidents actually prepare a written report and get it to the board members before the gavel clicks and you say the board meeting is now convening. Remind everybody periodically of the purposes of the chapter. If you have guests coming in and the mission and vision of the chapter aren't predominant and prominently displayed, they may not get the idea of why you're doing what you're doing. So it's good to remind everyone periodically of that. Exemplify cooperation, compromise, and flexibility. You're not a dictator, and the will of the chapter in some instances is different from the will of you as the chapter president. Be ready to accept the fact that things may not go, and the chapter may not be even 3 years from now, the chapter may be ready to go the direction that you'd like to see them go now. But if they're not ready now, it is not healthy for the chapter to have a leader that is butting heads with the culture of the chapter during the year. Delegate responsibility, but don't be afraid to use authority when it's necessary. So if you ask somebody to do a job and they volunteer and they're not doing it, you have to address that. You have to also accept personal accountability in rough times. The buck does stop with you as the president. Offer help and information, solicit help and information when you need it. You don't and aren't expected to have the answer to every question that somebody's going to ask. Keep everyone in the chapter engaged. One of the programs that the society has been going with is the Chuck Green program that Bev Green is now teaching. Give everybody a job. Have everybody feel important as they walk in the door and make them feel needed. We all want to feel needed and loved. And so if you have an attitude in your chapter where everybody is needed and everybody is wanted, and you convey that to the members, everything is going to go along much better. Always, always, always give appropriate recognition. Always. A friend of mine has a saying that I've never forgotten, which is praise in public, criticize in private. So if somebody's not doing their job, don't call them out in front of the chapter, in front of the chorus during a business meeting. Fred, I asked you to do this and you didn't do it. And you haven't done it for 4 weeks. Okay. If that's happening, call them aside, talk to them privately, but find an opportunity and find a reason to praise somebody or something the chapter does at every opportunity. Management and leadership, the difference here, the management, we've gone through all these programs before. Leadership inspires a shared vision, provides a purpose, promotes values, creates change, not change for change's sake, but create the ability to change to go the direction that the chapter wants to go. You generate motivation. You can't dictate motivation, and you can't demand that somebody be motivated to participate, but you can, by the way you act, generate that motivation. Challenge the process. If your chapter has had the same budget for 5 years and has done the same things on its calendar for 5 years, look at those processes and say, is there a reason, or is there something else we could be doing in order to be more successful? You've also got to empower others. And more importantly, model the way. Behave the way you want your chapter members to behave. Encourage to the heart. That's the difference. And so on the left side, we have the things that you need to do to manage the program. On the right side are the things that, if you choose to go that direction, you'll be leading a chapter in a direction that both they and you want to go.
Skipp,
Yes, sir.
quick comment. Steve Weismersky, and you may have said this up early when I was trying to get organized, said he probably elected you to maintain the status quo. Don't. You won't be leading if you maintain the status quo.
That's
Your
right.
job is to do those things on the right side of that last slide. The others you have to do. The leading portion is on the right side. And if people come up month to month on the board meeting with no report, sit down with them and say, what can we do so that you can have a report?
Exactly.
Not that the report's important, but that we're doing something. So, and I've experienced that and before, and I've just told myself, I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to find something for these people to do to help us move forward.
If you were elected chapter president because you were the only one who didn't step backwards when the nominating committee was looking for somebody, now is an opportunity for you to say, you know what, you did elect me, and I want to see this chapter succeed, and I want it to be more efficient than it has been. So too bad for you if I'm going in that direction, but you can't dictate it. You have to manage that direction and lead them in the direction that you want them to go. This slide is great as a speedometer for beginning with the end in mind. So in January, now is the time to create the direction. Throughout the year, you have to empower others. You lead managers. By September, you need to be also looking at succession planning, because you may wind up with turnovers in your officers. And then in December, boy, take a breath and toast your success. So a president needs to know how to lead by assessing the readiness of a follower to accept an assigned task. You got to know your membership so you can select the most appropriate leadership approaches to use. And then you have to modify and apply your own behavior in order to make that happen. Leadership is the ability to influence the thinking and behavior of others. That's leadership. That's not management. And to direct them toward specific goal outcomes. It's the ability to tell someone to go to hell and have them anxious to start the trip. Okay? Effective leadership is adapting your behavior to the performance needs of the individual or group. Can't stress too much the fact that we are not, as chapter presidents, dictators, and our job is not to tell everybody what their job is and how they will do it. You have to empower others. You have to know how to communicate. Plan for and distinguish between effective and ineffective communications. There's a huge difference, and we'll cover in a slide the forms of communication here in a minute. Recognize how different social styles impact communications. We all have people on the risers, and it's interesting that when we were working on the society strategic plan, one of the phrases that we came up with was the mysterious alchemy of singing together. And what that means is people come in and every one of us have somebody on the risers that is an absolute jerk. They're there, they exist. But when those people get in trouble and ask for help, we're there. And that's why we do this. It's because of the fraternity and the social connection and bond of the chapter. You have to know how to adopt and modify your own style and communication behaviors, because we don't communicate with everybody. People don't consume communications the same way. This is, I think, a very telling slide. Your words, word choice, phrasing, filler words are 9% of the message that people receive. Your voice, tone, volume, pitch, the way you say something is 41% of the message. But look at what the biggest percentage of communication is. It's body language, your eye contact, your posture, your gestures, facial expressions, how you look as the chapter president when you're standing in front of the chapter and communicating with the chapter conveys 50% of what the chapter member sees and hears and feels. Be sure and be mindful of those kinds of things. If you, as the chapter president, have a 3x5 note card and stand in front of the chapter and say, okay, this week we are doing singing Valentines. Thank you very much. That's not a very effective way to get people to join that program if your chapter does it.
Skipp,
Effective communication.
Skipp,
Yes, sir.
I've seen that same slide used by performance judges to indicate why the nonverbal gestures are so important.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And one other thing, when we admitted females, ladies, women to our chorus, I filled in for Steve Patrick one night as director, and afterward I was told by one of the ladies, you can't talk that directly to us. We're not used to being talked to that way. And I said, when was I didn't point anybody out or anything. They said, it's just a social style. And I said, thank you. I'll try to soften up a bit.
Exactly. And it's amazing how many of the disconnect, especially in competition, when the chorus sings really, really well, but doesn't look very good, it affects all of your scores because of the message that you communicate. It's what you put across the stage visually as well as orally. Effective communication requires knowing yourself, your target audience, selecting the most appropriate information and approach, and planning what, how, and when to deliver that message. Stress management for leaders. There are 4 different kinds of people usually involved in volunteer organizations, and we are a volunteer organization. People pay money to come every week to do what we do. You have to know the distinctions and take them into account in order to plan the amount of work that they're going to do and the effort they'll have to expend, and maintaining their stress levels and yours in an acceptable range. Regardless of the task, what you're going to find is a third of your membership more than likely are going to perform as asked. A third to a half are going to respond to pressure and prodding, and the remainder, it doesn't matter what you do, are going to turn out mostly to be deadwood. They are the kinds of people who will learn music and show up some of the time. They rarely succeed as barbershoppers over a lengthy period of time or make significant contributions to society. So, composition of volunteer groups. You have the cream. Those are never more than 5% of the group. Now, this is based on management studies. These are the creative members who model the way, generate the motivation, and encourage the heart. And those are typically the group from which your leadership team will be comprised. You have the responsible. This is 25 or 30%. They're the ones that it can be depended on. They're your committee chairs. They're thoughtful, and they play a proportionate part in any chapter or program. They need competent leadership, but they don't have to be prodded or supervised closely. They will do what they say and try to do it the way the leader wants it done. Moving on, we have the responsive. So the responsive, which is about 50% of your chapter, will probably respond in varying degrees if the climate's right. They typically don't act on sheer impulse, although interestingly about this group of people is that if it's a reaction on sheer impulse, it'll be a negative reaction. Most chapter members fall into this group, about 50%. They attend meetings, participate regularly, and tend to learn music as is and when it's taught. They do enjoy positive feedback, and that's one of the ways to keep them from reacting on sheer impulse negatively, is to provide the positive feedback. And then you have the inert bottom. There's about 20% ultimately unresponsive. They show up every week and they rarely make up their minds about anything. How many of us have sign-up sheets for performances, and we ask people to let us know in advance if we're going to be available for performance, and probably 1/5 of your members or so don't go to the website, don't volunteer, but sometimes they will show up at the last minute, unbeknownst to you. And you may have had a riser placement done, and then 3 guys or gals show up as you're getting ready to go on stage and say, I'm here, put me in, coach. So that's the types of people that we typically find in these kinds of groups. So why do people volunteer? Sometimes they say, well, somebody asked me. Sometimes they believe in you as the chapter president or somebody else in your music team. Some volunteer because of business or professional growth. Some volunteer, they're in it because they have an ego and say, I want the personal recognition. Some volunteer as an opportunity to give back. All of these types of volunteers are the types of volunteers that you as a leader need to be able to recognize in order to tap into those people's personalities to get them to be part of the team that you want to have in your chapter. How to get them and how to keep them. A volunteer needs a specific manageable task with a beginning and an end. Sometimes you can do that by asking them to be an officer. Sometimes they'll say, and what we're finding with millennials typically are not, as a group, don't typically volunteer for a long-term position such as being an officer of the chapter. But if you say, I need a volunteer to do something for a 2-week period or a specific project that I expect will take a month, those kinds of people are frequently willing to do that kind of thing with a specific beginning and end date and a manageable task. They need a task that matches their interests and their reasons for volunteering. If they are in the organization, as an example, because of their own personal recognition, then they're probably not going to want to be an usher at the chapter show. But if you ask them to do something marketing and ask them to contact a local PR output where their name's going to get in the paper or on TV, that's something that matches the skills and interests. They need a good reason for doing the task. How many of us, when we've asked somebody to do something, response has been, well, why should we do that? If you aren't able to say, because this is something the chapter needs for the following reason, that's a problem. They need written instructions most of the time. Some of us are oral, some of us are visual, but for the most part, in order to occupy a person's time and ask them to provide input over a period of time, they need to be able to constantly go back and say, okay, here's why they asked me, and here's my end result. So they need a charge. Here's why they asked me to do this. They need a reasonable deadline for completing the task. It's like asking somebody to be the chair of the annual show 2 weeks before the show. Probably not going to have much success. They need the freedom to complete the task when and where it's most convenient for the volunteer. And that's how, as a leader, you have to be flexible in picking the people that you ask to perform the task and in your deadlines. You have to give them resources. If a certain resource is needed for a task, you will not be successful asking somebody to do something that they are incompetent to do, for example. They need adequate training if somebody doesn't know how. For example, somebody should at some point train me how to use the Zoom platform if I'm going to do something for the chapter using it. Need a safe, comfortable, and friendly working environment. And that's where we get back into the praise in public, criticize in private. If there's an issue, go back and retrain and say, why isn't this working and what can we do? What can I do as a leader to help you and to enable you to complete the task that I ask you to do? They need follow-up to see that the task is completed. They need an opportunity to provide feedback when the task is finished. If somebody completes a task and they're very proud of that task and they turn in a report or they report something to the chapter and nobody says anything to them after that, and nobody says, hey, how did that work for you? And what could we have done differently to make that particular project easier for you to accomplish? Then they're not likely to volunteer again, right? They need appreciation, recognition, and rewards that match the reasons for volunteering. So if you have somebody who is a volunteer because they want to give back or pay something forward, recognize them for that when they finish the project. Recruiting volunteers. Sincerity works. It's the way you approach somebody asking them to perform a duty that is more than likely going to impact how that and why that happens. Match the position that you're asking them to with their interest and their capabilities. So if you have a project that is for, and using the show chairman example or show chair example, if you have somebody whose skill set is accounting, but aren't creative, recognize that and don't ask that individual to be the show chair unless you've had a disastrous financial show the year before and you need somebody to create a budget and manage to that budget. Provide accurate, clear responsibilities description. How many times have we asked somebody to do something, thought we gave them a charge and that they understood it, only to find somewhere down the road that they're not doing what we thought we asked them to do? You have to make sure that there are no questions and that everybody understands and has clearly articulated responsibilities when you ask somebody to volunteer for something. Don't minimize time requirements. There are jobs that in every chapter that require a fair amount of time to accomplish. And so don't as you're asking somebody to volunteer, say, if you know it's going to take hours a week to do something over the next 6 weeks, don't say, hey, I don't think this is going to take much of your time. You should be able to do this in 24 hours. Because when they get into it, you'll find that they don't complete the project and they aren't happy about it and may be very vocal to the rest of the chapter about having been asked. Communicate training and support available. People who volunteer to do projects need to understand the skill set that that you believe is required in order to accomplish the project that you're asking them to do. Explain they would be good in the job, and that's critical. When you're asking somebody to volunteer for a project, here's why I picked you to do this job. Here's why you're the best person in the chapter to do this job, and why we really would appreciate you taking the time to accomplish this project. Paint a word picture of them being successful. Imagine at the end of the show, at the afterglow, when we're all basking in the revenues that we've made and the great audience that we've had, and boy, we're going to be standing in appreciation for all the hard work that you put in. Tell them that at the beginning. Be sure their needs are being met. Volunteers want their work to make a difference and to be appreciated. You have to recognize them genuinely and frequently. If somebody's working on something for you as the chapter president, talk about that project as time permits in front of the chapter. I mean, not 10 minutes at a time, but during your business meeting, talk about, boy, Sam's working on this and we know it's going to be a good job, and we'll have a report from him at some point soon. Volunteers have outside lives. You have to understand conflicts and honor them. A lot of times we ask people to do something, and they do one task and it takes more time than we thought it was going to take, or that we told them it was going to take. And then the next time we ask them, we find them saying, no, I did that once, and I missed a family thing, or I missed a work thing even because of it. And so I'm not going to help you guys anymore. They're busy people. Don't waste their time ever. And don't punish a volunteer for being successful. How many of us, when somebody new comes in and they're a ball of fire and we ask them to do something, then we ask them to do, because they were good at that one thing, we give them 5 other tasks. And the next thing you know, a year later, they're asked to be the chapter president. That leads to burnout. So that's not a good way to treat volunteers who are producing and doing good work for you. Okay. Develop a succession plan for you and your entire board. We preach this all the time. And frequently we hear from chapter leaders, look, we're lucky to be able to fill people for this year. Don't talk to me about a succession plan, because can't do it. It needs to be something that you have on your mind so that you and your nominating committee can be thinking about who the talents are, and take time to try and groom those people to say, you know, you've been really good at this. Maybe next year, would you consider that, and increasing your level of activity? But the succession plan is really important. And all highly successful chapters with highly successful administrative boards have succession plans so that you know who is on the team. Each of your functional vice presidents, if your chapter is large enough, should have a team. It might be a team of 1, but if you can identify somebody under each functional vice president to say, would you work with so-and-so as and you don't even need to say as an understudy, but say, the music and performance VP needs to have something like this done. Would you help him? Or the chapter secretary needs help with looking up some corporation status. Could you do that? talk to your functional VPs and make sure that they're actually considering who might be able to work with them and have similar temperament. Ensure your executive vice president is capable to succeed you. And if they're not, you got to develop them or have the hard discussion that say, you know what, this isn't really working. There are jobs that an executive VP should be able to do and should be able to be assigned. And as a chapter president, you will find your future chapter's success in large part depends on whether, if you have an EVP, some chapters don't, but if you have one, make sure that you are working with them throughout your term as president. And that gives you a chance to evaluate whether that person can step into your shoes and can lead the chapter in the direction that the chapter wants to be led. Help each board officer select and train a successor, and committees are the key to succession. If you have a chapter that has successful committees, your functional VPs will be able to talk to you as the nomination committees come around for your input, and will be able to help identify people who are capable of stepping into those shoes. It should go without saying, but boy, get to know every member and their interests. It says their interests and capabilities. My bad on that gender issue. It's knowing your membership that will enable you to successfully lead and not just manage your chapter. Have periodic board reviews and discussions about specific members' capabilities and readiness. You don't have to do that in an open board meeting, but be sure that your board is aware of the capabilities of members, and ask your functional VPs and committee heads for names of people who they think might be able to succeed them, and begin to develop some projects and some assignments that those people could undertake and enable them to step into higher shoes or higher roles in the leadership of the chapter in ensuing years. That also gets into the issue of the strategic plan. If you have a direction for 3 to 5 years and can share that with all of your members, that will enable you also to get them engaged in the direction that the chapter is heading.
Skipp,
Yes.
there is a resource on BHS website under Healthy Chapter Initiative, I believe, called a Member Talent Survey that they can easily download, print, and distribute to individuals. There are 2 versions. There is a version 1 that is kind of a humorous version. Version 2 is the one that I adapted, which I find a little bit more meaningful and workable. So notice both of those versions, see which one works for you. And if you want to take a quick assessment of what they can do from their own mouths, that's a quick way to do that.
The society went away from it, but when I joined literally 50 years ago, on the back of the membership application was a survey. And of course, there was no internet when I joined. So you filled out whether you had show experience, whether you played an instrument, whether you had marketing, whether you had any kinds of those skills. And then we threw all that stuff away when we digitized the service. But those kinds of surveys are very valuable to you as a chapter president to be able to go back and if you have the kind of survey that Rick was talking about, and ask people, what do you do when you don't barbershop? For years, we made a point of saying, we don't care what you do for a living. We don't care anything about you when you walk in the door other than what part do you sing? Well, we need to care about what people do for a living, and we need to care what their other interests are, because that enables us to develop a successful leadership and succession plan. So remember, you manage the chapter first. That's the first slide deck that we went through. You have to ensure that that machine is running smoothly before you can engage in any kind of leadership activities. But don't spend your president's term in management. You earned the right to lead, and it's a right. Take it. Understand your leadership style, your leadership skills, and those of your membership, or you can't lead them. I mean, this says before leading them, but if you have a leadership style that doesn't match people in the chapter, then you will not be able to lead them. You might be able to manage them, but you're not going to be able to lead them. Make sure that the desires of the members drive the mission statement. The culture of your chapter will change. Every chapter culture changes, some years by a significant amount, and you've got to understand and know where the chapter wants to go before you can lead them in that direction. Construct a measurable strategic plan to complement the mission statement. You need to know where you want to be in 3 to 5 years in order to help the chapter engage and all of your members engage and buy in to the direction that the chapter's going. Years ago, there was an implied geographic territory when a chapter was chartered. And I can remember in the early 70s, mid 70s, I lived in Columbus, Ohio. And the chapter there was the Buckeye Columbus chapter. And the society had the nerve in 1966 to allow a charter in Grove City, which was a suburb 10 miles south of downtown Columbus. And the members of that Buckeye Columbus chapter were incensed that that other chapter could be that close, because the theory was they're going to be stealing members. What we've learned over time is that if your chapter isn't providing the kind of experience that the member wants, they'll leave. Better to have them find someplace and another chapter that has a different product. And by the way, all of our chapter products are different. None of our chapters are alike. The culture of every chapter is your chapter's culture. And so if your chapter isn't able to provide an experience, rather than driving somebody out of a barbershop experience, wouldn't we all be better off if there were multiple chapters in an area and they were different products and different cultures, so that if somebody isn't happy with what you're providing, they go somewhere else and still have a successful barbershop experience. On the other hand, it would be good as well if the other chapters aren't offering somebody that they can come visit your chapter and say, wow, this is different. I want to do what you guys do. And so that's the value of having multiple chapters in an area. The strategic plan, particularly when you can show a guest, here's the direction we're headed and here's what we want to do. It is so much easier to get somebody that's to recognize early, wow, this is a direction I want to go over the long term. And so now we will be willing to come back in the next couple of weeks and perhaps join. You're the leader of the strategic plan, and your job is to lead the managers. Your functional VPs, your committee chairs are managing projects. Your job is to lead those managers. And remember, you can't lead them all. No matter how you model behavior, and no matter what your management style is, there is going to be a segment of the chapter that will not be responsive. Do not let that get under your skin. It happens to us all. And just don't stress out, work around them. We all can do that. I'll leave you this. So you inspire, create, empower, motivate, and above all, encourage the heart. That's why we're all here. That's what we need to do. So here we are. This is my contact information and my phone number, my email address. And I am happy to undertake a discussion now of anything you all want to talk about. It's Q&A time.
Yeah, so just unmute, or if somebody's talking, wave a hand and we'll go in order. Ted?
So one of the tools that our leadership has used in the past that it struck me kind of really aligns with the 4 types of members that you spoke about in this portion is the skill will chart. It's kind of a thing you have to be careful about because it can, if it gets into the wrong eyesight, it tends to maybe hurt a person's self-esteem. But as a leader, it really helped me understand, here is my spread of inputs and how do I focus my energy. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that comparison and some of the pitfalls and or improvements to process that come from those types of things?
In terms of the skill set that you have, Ted, or in terms of using that particular form that you're talking about?
Yes.
The part of the SWOT analysis that the board could do, which is an identification of strengths and weaknesses, and Ted, I think you're getting some of the secretary's class bleeding over. There we go. The SWOT analysis for the board to do can involve the kinds of forms, and I don't know that I would encourage those to be written too much, other than simply notes. But people and personalities obviously impact the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the chapter. So if the board early on, and I highly recommend doing the kind of SWOT analysis early, January, February, pull the board together to say, okay, let's talk about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and do the SWOT analysis, because it enables you to identify the direction. And the first thing we talked about under management was you have to know immediately what are the issues that the board has to address going forward. And so the SWOT analysis will help the board to all coalesce around, particularly if you agree and come to consensus on the strengths, opportunities, and threats. So that kind of an analysis will help you, and that's got to include personalities. One of the threats of your chapter might be a particular personality or the abilities of somebody who is currently in some kind of a committee chair position, but not functioning. Or it may be the person on the risers, and we all have one, who interrupts the director to tell the director how the song should be directed. And they do it vocally. And all the chapters have something like that. So that may be a threat moving forward that has to be dealt with. So those kinds of things all play into the SWOT analysis.
Kevin Tenney has a question. Did you have a follow-up, Ted? Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, our chapter, we have a couple of issues going on right now. One is we meet weekly and we have 6, sometimes 7 guys on our call. We do have 2 or 3 other guys that they're sick of doing everything via Zoom. So they don't want to, they just don't come on to our call. So we're a small chapter, and because we didn't get a chance to have a meet in person and have a fall show or Christmas show, we're struggling financially as well. So, you know, our board has met and we've talked about, you know, are we going to be able to still continue as a chapter? I just need some resources, and I need someone to kind of maybe jump on our call at some point and say, here's some ideas, some things you need to do to get some money coming in so you can still pay your director. And how can we grow our membership when we're meeting via Zoom?
Do you have somebody who is attending the other Leadership Academy classes today?
Yeah, we have, Lonnie Fluharty.
Sure.
Lonnie's in the secretaries. We have Kyle Swisher is in our membership media, I think so it's called, and Kevin Aldana is in our, he's our vice president of, I forget what it is. The vice president, well.
Where I'm going with this is that those people should be getting resources from the Leadership Academy, talking about marketing and PR and some of the things now to encourage participation internally. I don't know whether you have asked guests to lead a session on Zoom, but for example, my chapter has had David Wright be a 45-minute guest of our chapter. We've had Sandy Wright come in to talk about the judging categories. We've had Tim Warwick come in to talk about vocal presentation and vocal pedagogy. We've had, Greg Clancy. There are a lot of people who are very willing to jump on. Theo Hicks is very willing to participate in those kinds of Zoom sessions. So to build your chapter participation, you might be able to say, okay, all chapters, we're going to have a meeting and our guest is whoever. And they're either going to talk about this subject, and we'd love to have everybody participate to at least begin to get internal participation.
If you do not have somebody attending Michelle Nish's session this morning, she is excellent at membership and marketing development. That should be recorded so you can get access to that. And I'm assuming that we will post somehow, somewhere, how to get access to these sessions this morning that you were not able to attend, or if you want to go back and review something. I'm assuming it'll be on the singjad.com website, but I don't know if that's been determined yet.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, Kyle is in that session.
Okay.
Good. And I just saw Troy Ball posted in the chat that their chapter did a winter harmony camp and invited youth from a local high school for a day fun camp, male and female, one song. And so those kinds of activities are possible as well.
Patrick has a question.
Okay. Well, Willard had his hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see Willard's. Go, Willard.
Actually, just a comment for Kevin. I know that in the Cardinal District, two of the chapters that were smaller actually started having joint Zoom meetings, and they would alternate the director one week to the director for the other course the next week, and then that helped them to kind of keep interest because there was a different director speaking to them every other week, but gave them a little bit more involvement.
Thanks, Willard. And who else had the question? Patrick? Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick Scarpiti from Land of Legend Chorus in Newark, Ohio. I hate to bring up the elephant in the room, but COVID. I missed the first 30 minutes due to technical difficulties of your presentation. I'm not really sure if you mentioned that. Part of my concern is strategic planning, number one. Number two, trying to recruit people. I noticed the dues went up quite a bit this year to $175. And, I know all these technical things cost a lot of money. So the problem comes in when you're recruiting new people. That seems like a sizable outlay for somebody that doesn't have, a lot of experience on what barbershop can do for them. So two things, can you briefly speak about your BHS strategic outlook on COVID? And then secondly, is there a way for dues to be somehow deferred, a coupon for free coffee at Starbucks for a year? What do you look at that? How do you foresee handling that?
Well, the society has been part of a multiple choral group study of aerosol physics at the University of Colorado, and so we're not recommending group singing, although if you dig into the data, and my chapter actually did that, the president of our chapter in Indianapolis is an engineer, and concluded that that if you social distance and everybody wore what he called tight-fitting masks, didn't get on the risers, but that if you look at the aerosol particle spread, that if one person is infected in a room and it has a single HVAC system, that within about 30 minutes of exhalation in there, that's when you begin to get a sufficient quantity of concentration of viral particles to infect somebody else. So our rehearsal hall has 2 large rooms with 2 separate HVAC systems. And in November, we all ordered the singers' masks. I don't know if you saw the Vocal Majority show where they all had the masks that stick out 3 or 4 inches to allow you to sing. And so we all ordered those, and we were about to go to an in-person rehearsal in that format where we would sing for no more than 30 minutes in one room and then move to the other room. And then the venue that we are going to be using for rehearsal, so that the state recommended no more than 20 people in a room, and we've got a pretty good sized chapter, so that got kiboshed. But it is possible to get together. You have to take the precautions, and so in terms of the dues, Chris, can you talk about district dues? They haven't been raised, have they? And you're muted.
Yep.
There.
Sorry, guys. I was browsing on other screens. Dues have not been changed. We have not made any sort of changes to those since I've been involved. So yeah, everything's the same from the district perspective.
And the society dues didn't go up depending on how you choose to pay. They went up, I think, $9 from 120 to 129. So,
so there was a discount that was in place for seniors that had years of service.
Yes.
I think the change amounts to $36 if you were enjoying that discount and now you don't have that discount any longer. The increase was $36, I believe.
For some reason, I paid upwards of $170. And my recollection is it was around 140 to 49 in discount or checks or whatever. So it seemed to me like it went up $30. Now, I may have just donated $30 to the BHS, which is fine. But that's quite a sizable amount for somebody just walking in the door saying, after 3 practices, you're down for 140. You might say, I got 170 something. And how do you approach that?
There is a payment system. I understand. It doesn't have to be all paid at one time, so you can engage that way. I thought your larger. Oh, and another piece there is if we are asking someone to participate and they say I just cannot afford that. And by the way, I've been paying 175 for the last 3 or 4 years, and I don't know how you get away with 145 because our local dues are not that much. Our local dues are minimal. Anyway, if you get somebody that absolutely cannot pay, what we do on the board is we take up a collection, and we have a social fund, and we cover that person's first year's dues, and tell them, this is our chance to help you engage to see if this is something that you want to do on a long-term basis. Here is a way that you can pay for that so that it doesn't hit you all at one time. This is how.
My understanding from last year is you're not allowed to have a super fund to do that. Now,
if we take up a private collection, that's a private collection. And if we pay someone else's dues as individuals, we're not operating as a board.
so it's kind of a sleight of hand here. You can't have a super fund, but we could easily ask everybody for $10 to pay for a super fund.
Absolutely.
So that's legit. So to
Sure.
speak.
It'd be the same as my paying for that person's membership just as a friend, but I'm just taking collections from 3 or 4 other people. No problem.
Patrick, there's also, if it's preventative for somebody to pay the increase, you can contact customer service, and they have said that they will assist with getting that discount reversed. Also, the increase on folks that didn't qualify for the discount any longer, supposedly there's a coupon that went out to folks that were affected, and they could use that coupon to still pay the same price from last year to this year.
I was not aware of that, but I have gotten a couple complaints. So if maybe Rick could forward that on, that would be helpful.
I don't know how to access that. Chris, if you could let me know
Yeah,
where
it's just a matter of calling into the society. I'll post the phone number.
and where. Oh, on chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Part of the contention is a lot of the members in my chorus have kind of backed down a little bit, and all we're doing is meeting by Zoom. And that seems like a lot of dues at this point. So any coupons would be helpful.
One other thing from an informational standpoint from leadership, this afternoon session will address some of the things that you are talking about. It may not address technically or directly your specific need, but we will be talking about how to gear back up, when to gear back up, and that's going to be moot. So the emotional side of that and the external relations side of that. So if you could tune into this afternoon session, I think that may give you at least some direction so that you can find the answers to your particular situation on your own.
Thank you. Thank you. Just as a technical question here, is this going to continue into the next session, or do we have to back out of Zoom and try to fish around to find the next session? I did get, the original data from Eventbrite, but that didn't work. Is it going to work this afternoon?
Right. Just go to singjad.com, and the first thing you're going to see is the Eventbrite registration. Ignore that, scroll down, and each one of these sessions are listed to enter here. And that last one that you'll find there, I believe, in order, is this afternoon's
Rick,
session.
when you get to singjad.com, you've got to click into the Virtual Leadership Academy page, and then it's listed.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm also going to post the Zoom link right here. Maybe I'm not. I was going to try to.
I just posted the direct link to that page in the chat. That takes you to the page you were referring to, and the link is bottom. Yep.
Thanks, Josh.
Any other questions?
Somebody else had a hand up a while ago that flashed and I didn't see it.
Oh, Dwayne.
Willard.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I thought that the Livewire had some information in it too, discussing discounts at 50% off for people during COVID. Am I misremembering that?
I don't remember that, but I may have missed it.
Okay.
But as Chris posted the contact numbers for Harmony Hall, and so feel free to call and explain your situation, and they will deal with it. Ask for customer service.
Right, Harmony Hall is extremely responsive, I have found. And so if you can contact them, they will get back to you and then set up a phone call or whatever, and they will work with you. It's been my experience.
Anything else?
My raise hand button seems to be intermittent at best. Sorry, so I'm just going to jump in.
How about your real hand? Would that work?
I was doing it for what it's worth. So this is more feedback than a question, but some stuff that has worked for us about both of the last Patrick's and the person who spoke before him. I apologize, I don't remember who that was. That has been helpful for us in this time. We chose the first 3 months of quarantine to shift our focus for a while to technical skills. We still sang every rehearsal that we had over Zoom using learning media and the sound sharing options, but we dedicated a portion of each rehearsal to helping our members who are more technically challenged to overcome those challenges. And at first, we did basic, some people struggle with Windows. So we did a couple sessions on just how does Windows work. We did a couple sessions on how to use audio software, and we gave ourselves a short-term goal of putting together a virtual ensemble. Now, we were fortunate in that we had a person among us that could do that, but what we found was a lot of members learned musical skills as a secondary consequence of having to record themselves, and then I showed them the mixing process, and they were like, oh, so that's what you mean by the vowel is the beat impulse, or oh, that's what you mean by I'm a little bit flat here. It was really helpful to visualize some of that. So we found that engagement through really going outside of the musical bubble helped many of our members stay engaged. And the other side of that was I had personal conversations with the people who aren't comfortable with meeting virtually. And I just said, it's okay. If you're not being fulfilled by the virtual situation and we can't meet in public and that's what you need, let's just stay in touch and let's reconvene when you can. And I tried to keep them personally involved and let them know that there is light at the end of this for them. So I don't take it or leave it.
Great points. Let me say 2 other things about funding right now that may not have occurred to us. You may have somebody who is a fan of barbershop in your community who is better off financially than the rest of us, where $1,000 means little to them, but it would mean an awful lot to your group. Pursue some sort of benefactor for your chapter. Give them recognition if they want it. Sometimes they don't. But that might be a source of income, an immediate source of income that you don't have to work that hard for over an extended period of time, but you're going to have to take the effort to go find that person. The other thing is grants. There are arts councils. I talked to Kevin Lynch before he left Barbershop Harmony Society, and he said there are state arts council, arts and music councils that provide, they have to give away money. And so you can pursue writing grants. I was getting ready to pursue something like that for us before COVID struck. Should have probably done it during, but I have not yet. But that writing grants to entities that fund music organizations and music efforts is a natural way for them to do what they're supposed to do and for us to benefit from it. So those are 2 options.
Hey, Rick, I know the grant writing process can be kind of a mystery to a lot of folks. Do you have any templates or any past successes that you could share with us?
I've written grants in the past, but they have been educational in focus because I was a university professor. I have evaluated grants that BHS has available, and those are also possibly available, although those tend to be event focused. Like a youth camp or something of that sort. With Kevin's departure, I don't know if they have a chief grant writer, but Kevin did a session at Harmony University a few years ago, or it was at a midwinter leadership summit or something, where he went through and talked about how chapters can get funding. If you want to try to get hold of Kevin Lynch, I can try to find an email for him, or you might be able to track him down through VHS, and he can shoot that information to you. That would be the best source, and if he had good stuff, that would be the best source I could point you to at this point, Chris.
And hang on a second, Ted and Ray. Willard Adkins just forwarded the live wire was September 10th of 2020. There's a that issue had something on Project Connect, which is resources for BHS leadership on how to stay connected with your barbershop family. But it also talked about the discounts for new and returning members. But those were through the end of 2020. And there was a coupon for that. That said, we've also, I think, had other communication from Harmony Hall that says, if that's still an issue, talk to them. Thanks, Will.
We want to go to Ray?
Yes, Ray and then Ted.
Thank you, Skipp. My observation in listening to the comments is that we can all use more resources for our chapter, and a lot of different chapters have come up with wonderful ideas. Ted in particular, the one you mentioned about the activities you've done with your chapter members. I think that we could all benefit from not trying to reinvent the wheel and take advantage of what other chapters have done already. Is there a resource listing or a list of chapters that are having a meeting? We have a weekly Zoom meeting for Akron, and I think it would be great if any other chapters that aren't having a meeting, in Akron or Timbuktu would like to join us. That would be perfectly fine, but I don't see a common source of that information, including, I don't know if you recorded your sessions, Ted, but that stuff is out there and it's taking place, and there's some chapters that don't have anything going on, and any of the members of those inactive chapters could all benefit from tapping into this stuff. So that's my suggestion, is to make that available.
One of the things that I would say is Basecamp is a good way to communicate with all of the presidents, and I can talk with, and Chris and I can talk about initiating a discussion on this particular feature, this particular aspect of leadership, and get a discussion going. And my experience has been, though, those things tail off real fast. So I don't know if that would be an effective route for us to go. Maybe the intense interest in this at the moment because of COVID might continue that longer than normal, but Chris and I can talk about at least getting that started on the Basecamp discussion. I don't know what's a discussion board or whatever it is.
Well, we're in the middle of the storm now. We need immediate. So if I can go to the Alexandria Harmonizers weekly Zoom meeting, that would probably be a great event or activity for me or anybody in my chapter. If I have that information available easily, and I don't think Alexandria wouldn't mind if I joined their meeting.
Yeah, I'd say look them up and contact them. I mean, just go online, find a website, find the director or the president.
Be proactive, put that information out.
Yeah,
here's a list of everybody that has a Zoom meeting on Tuesday night.
There's a
I don't know how we collect it.
Attending my Indianapolis chapter meetings, and he attends, he said 4 other chapter meetings. He lives in California, but he participates, and
you could do it 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Just one final.
Bennett's been waiting. Go ahead, Bennett.
Thank you.
Sorry, one of the really great ideas I'm hearing from, this reflects part of the same conversation that Ray raised and that Ted has contributed to, and that is the idea of having both guests or experts, a kind of list of people who can, upon whom we could call once in a while to give us a 10-minute or a 20-minute discussion on some aspect of singing, for example. No doubt there are people around the country who would be willing to do that. Is there an obvious place to go to find a list of people who would be interested and willing on occasion to tap into a Zoom meeting for us?
So yeah, we actually started a Harmony Helper program last year that honestly didn't get off the ground because it was meant to be an in-person Harmony Helper. We intended to call on members of the JDAC, the quartet, the JED Quartet Champion Group,
yes,
to send coaches in and do that kind of thing. Certainly, that's something we can facilitate for your Zoom meeting. Jeff Gem is the lead contact for the Harmony Helper program. Also, we have a guy in the district who is responsible for chapter success, Nate Ogg. Do you know Nate?
Right.
He would be a good place to go as well. But I would start with Jeff. And
great,
just let
Chris. If you would put those in the chat, that would be great.
I'll give you Jeff's contact information. You could start with him for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, great, appreciate it.
And also Nate Ogg, because Nate works for the society as a chapter success manager. He lives in Johnny Appleseed district, but he works all over the country. So Nate would be another good guy. Chris, do you have his contact?
That's what I was just going to say. I don't think I have quick access to his actually, you know what? I just talked to him on the phone yesterday. I'll put his phone number in as well.
Okay, cool.
That is really helpful. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
You can track him down also on the BHS website under their staff, and you can contact him that way.
I put his email address in the chat. His BHS.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay, and his name again is?
Nate Ogg, OGG.
Patrick, hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Great discussion with everybody. Just to follow up, two follow-up questions. One from Ted Rose. He mentioned two technical programs that might allow, if I understand him right, voices to blend at our Zoom practice. And then secondly, to Skipp, the COVID vaccine, are we still going to, does BHS have any insight, or are there still going to be studies done on the impact of vaccines? And if you're vaccinated, can you sing or can you not? So Ted, if you could address those two technical programs. One was learning media, I believe. And the second one was sound something, and I missed that one.
I wasn't referring specifically to any applications. Our chapter uses a combination of Zoom as our interface method, where we will have one person lead by singing and the other folks harmonize to that person singing. You can't have multiple people doing it at the same time, otherwise lag issues come into place. But we have been able to have effective sectional rehearsals and duet rehearsals that way. I will mix tracks submitted to me together using a program called Adobe Audition. Other people have used Cakewalk or GarageBand or BandLab. There's a lot of them out there. I would be happy to take that conversation off of this meeting because it's a little off topic. I'll post my email in the chat, harmonyjunkie001@gmail.com. I will put it out there as text to talk about things that we have done that have been successful and that require different levels of expertise to accomplish. So I'm sorry I can't be more directly helpful than that right at the moment. The other thing that I wanted to mention as a result to that question, or a result to an earlier question, is a lot of assistive local organizations from a financial standpoint. So at the city or community level, will often provide their own templates for their grants. So you may, if you're reaching out to a more local organization, start off the conversation by asking if they have a template. Many times the answer will be yes.
We have about 2 or 3 more minutes. We can go over, I guess, a little bit. I don't know if this will automatically cut off at 3.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to do that, but I wanted to get to Patrick's question about the vaccine. And the answer is that I believe the society is going to say, follow CDC guidelines. And if CDC says, if you've had the vaccine, you still have to do social distancing and still worry about people who have not had the vaccine for a while, but things are looking up, I think, for being able to go to in-person meetings. I don't know how soon.
We'll talk about that this afternoon a little bit, but there's nothing definite.
Yeah.
There's no definitive time or conditions. It's still up in the air, and the situation changes from day to day, as we have seen.
And
projections are wrong.
Yeah, and I also wanted to let everybody know that under Project Connect, I just opened that section of the live wire that Willard sent, and it says Project Connect expands into 2021. So it says extended 2020 offerings through 2021, and there's a link that says click here to review our extended Project Connect 2020 offerings, including 1/2 off membership dues for new members and $10 person of note referral discounts for current BHS members. So again, contact the society if you have questions about that.
Several things have been posted, addresses for Nate, for Jeff, for Ted. All you have to do is highlight those and hit Control-C, and that will copy it, and you can paste it into a Word document or wherever you want to paste it later on. I don't know how quickly this ends.
Myself all the time.
Do I?
I said, or an email to myself. That's what I do, copy and paste and send myself an email. So.
That's what I do too.
You can also go into the chat menu or open up the chat window, and there's a 3-dot typical looking thing at the bottom right. If you click on that, it says save chat. So you can save the entire chat session, and it'll put it on your hard drive, and it'll also allow you to find out where it is.
Well, why would we want to do that? That's too simple.
I don't know. I have no idea.
That's a great suggestion. And yes, I see that down there now. It's even got a little file thing that I could probably click on and save to inside of the 3 dots there. Anything else we need to talk about real quickly? Because we have another session at 1 o'clock. People have to eat and take care of business.
There is an evaluation form that is available, and Rick, you're going to send that?
Right. I will send that out in the email that I send out to everybody here. Reminder once again, if you didn't register through Eventbrite, shoot me an email so that I will have your email to add to that list. Let's see, was there something else? Oh, thank you for participating today. Thank you for doing what you do for your chapters. Go and lead and change not only your chapter, but change the community and the world. So,
guys,
you didn't say shoot me, did you?
Yeah, thank you all for your time and attention today. And if anybody has any questions or comments, you have my phone number and email address, so feel free to be in touch. I'm available pretty much anytime. So I think we're ready to stand adjourned, right?
I think we are.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Gals, appreciate it.
Bye, guys.